I knew that something needed to be done.
Something needed to be done.
Yes.
And what was that?
That was my place in the world, my story. The story of myself, the story of my people.
Welcome to this part 2 MIMSI Africa special on the history of African literature. Last time we discussed the pure traditional African arts of pre-colonial literature in their untouched form, from oral tradition to even dance that were prominent in many ethnic groups. If you missed it, you can totally check it out and then come back. So as promised, our attention in part 2 of this series will turn to post-colonial literature around the period of 1884, around that period of the dreaded Berlin Conference, to the Year of Africa in 1960. And please note, some scholars may call this the colonial period, but for better arrangement of this triology, we called it post-colonial literature, since post means after. We're looking at it in the context of literature that came as a response after the white man came, after we got colonized from the late 19th century. Besides, post doesn't necessarily mean something has ended, it just means after something has happened. But if you still want to call it colonial literature, it's still okay, hey, whatever floats your boat. A period where land was occupied and divided amongst the European colonizers such as Britain, Portugal, France, Germany, with no regard of who owned it before.
How do you think your ancestors got these? You think they paid a fair price? Or did they take it like they took everything else?
And note, since the independent dates vary a lot, in this section we will not necessarily look at the period though, but more of the texts that were written before a particular nation reached its independence. Much like slavery in the USA, the African natives in countries like Mozambique, Rwanda, Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa, Togo, Senegal were being oppressed and faced severe brutality. They took our lands. While many Africans were being schooled about how Jesus died for them on the cross, the rest of the Europeans extracted natural resources like gold, timber, coal, and took the lands. And not to mention, there was incredible racial brutality and slavery while they did it too. One notorious example is that of King Leopold of Belgian Congo. This guy wiped out around half of the natives in the Gold Coast during the brutal slave-like governing, yet still claiming to be a civilized, God-fearing Catholic. The coming of the missionaries had a huge impact on the continent. The Christian missionaries exposed Africans who were in their colonized territory to Western languages, which were mainly French in such countries like Cameroon, Senegal, Burundi, Portugal, in Mozambique, and of course English, Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa. Since most of these missionaries immediately dismissed basically everything about Africans to even their names.
When I went to school, the lady teacher, Miss Mdingane, asked, "What is your name?" I told him my African name, Kholehlas. She says, "No, I don't want that one. You must have a Christian name." So I say, "No, I don't have one." She says, from today, you are going to be Nelson.
It meant historically sacred storytelling practices like oral tradition and folk tales and other African traditions were forced to take a back seat as written literature in colonial languages simultaneously rose to take its place, since the Europeans were teaching many Africans to read and write in these foreign languages. As Africa was being colonized, also in this period, these Christian missionaries labeled most of the traditional customs we discussed in the last video as being quote, uncivilized, backward, demonic, and of course, savage. Who can forget the word savage, especially if you have read Joseph Conrad's 1902 novel based on Africa, Heart of Darkness.
They were called criminals, and the outraged law, like the bursting shells, had come to them, an insoluble mystery from the sea. All their meagre breasts panted together, the violently dilated nostrils quivered, the eyes stared stonily uphill. They passed me within 6 inches without a glance, with that complete death-like indifference of unhappy savages.
Excuse me? Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Had tripped over some emotion. I'm alright. As you can see, Heart of Darkness could have either been really accurate on the white man's biased perception of Africa or just an over-the-top pile of racist shit. But one thing is for sure, it is a classic example of just how little these settling Europeans understood Africans, and even worse, understanding them as human beings at that time. Thus, much of the literature written in this era was written to address this serious predicament. In 1911, Joseph Ephraim Casely Hayford of the Gold Coast published what is recorded as the first African novel written in English, Ethiopia Unbound: Studies in Race Emancipation, which interrogated colonization from the angle of an educated black man and solutions to battle it, and assuring his native Fante people that one day they would see independence and get their freedom. This was one of the earliest works to discuss these new issues of agitation for black freedom. With the bad rap African culture was now getting, many emerging authors real reason to uphold African art, history, and culture, such as Thomas Munofu when he wrote Shaka, published in 1925 in Sesotho. In similar traditional aesthetic fashion, in 1935, The Girl Who Killed to Save, Nonqawuse the Liberator. It was a spiritual South African story about Xhosa prophetess Nonqawuse. But perhaps from 1934, a more prominent movement was that of the Negritude in West African countries such as Senegal, which was defined as. This paved a way for a movement that opposed these demeaning ideas by writing poetry that showed the essence, the beauty, the magnificence, and the glory of African traditional ways, led by prominent West African French writers like Léopold Ségur, Léon Damas, and Aimé Césaire. In 1948, Léopold Sédar Ségnur's first anthology of French poetry written by an African, Anthologie de la Nouvelle Poésie Nègre Malgache de langue française. This movement also included the poetic masterpiece Black Woman, with such classic lines like, "Naked woman, black woman, covered with your skin that is life, with your form that is beauty. The lights of the mind, the glittering of the red gold against your watered skin. Under the shadow of your hair, my care is enlightened. By the neighboring suns of your eyes, your beauty that passes, the form that I fixed in the eternal, before the jealous fate turn you to ashes to feed the roots of life." Oh, so beautiful, makes me want to cry. As you can see, these poems were dedicated to glorifying, praising, and celebrating the very things Europeans despised, such as our dark skin, our thick hair, the shape of our women, the nature, the dance, the rhythm, the life that is African. So later in 1948, the late colonial period, as the racial tensions and wars intensified, this was in part because, especially for the black French citizens who realized they could fight for their own independence in the midst of fighting for their colonial settlers in World War II.
The mindset is the barbarians are backward and inferior, and for their own benefit we have to uplift them and civilize them and educate them and so on. I mean, when you've got your boot on someone's neck and you're crushing them, you can't say to yourself, "I'm a son of a and I'm doing it for my own benefit." So what you have to do is figure out some way of saying, "I'm doing it for their benefit."
As more African writers became enlightened and educated, they started to see further and further through this hypocrisy of colonization. After World War II, written literature rose sharply again, and it progressively showed strong themes of liberation, freedom, and independence. As big as Africa is, from even early on, the fascinating thing is most of the strongest themes discussed in the books were quite consistent, such as the theme of racism became a prominent theme in such books such as South Africa's Cry, the Beloved Country, which interrogated the same topic Osmani wrote in his first French novel, Le Docanois, about Diao, an African stevedore who faced racism on the docks of Marseille. It is also important to know there were white authors in Africa who empathized with with the black majority in the light of the dehumanization they were going through, such as legendary writers Nadine Gordimer of South Africa and Nobel Prize winner Doris Lessing of Zimbabwe, whose ass actually got deported for her racially liberal writing shenanigans. It would further set the pace for Black Pride and other talented enlightened novelists who would soon follow. Novels that would offer more detailed descriptions of internal conflicts of their black characters faced usually at the hands of colonization. These included internally conflicted characters such as To'Unli from Houseboy by Ferdinand Oyono and Medza from Mission to Color by Mongobeti, which portrayed lead native characters who had trouble reconciling their true African selves with their colonially tempered versions of themselves. In 1958 became a landmark year for African literature as Nigerian Chinua Achebe in 1958 published the then acclaimed Things Fall Apart, which was included in New York Times 100 Best English Language Novels from 1923 to 2005, and one of the most influential and well-known African novels of all time. The book was written as a response to Joseph Conrad's racist novel, Heart of Darkness, that portrayed Africans to be little more than savage animals.
The hurt nigger moaned feebly somewhere nearby, and then fetched a deep sigh that made me mend my pace away from there.
Okay, I heard it the first time. It was told the story of a textured and complex main character, Okonkwo, whose traumatic experiences as a child influenced his bad decisions in his adulthood, as well as detailing the negative impact colonization had on his Igbo family, community, and natural way of life. On top of having a fascinating plot with fascinating characters, the book comprehensively dealt with African society in a respectful and dignified way that was rare before. In 1962 is when legendary Kenyan writer Ngugi wa Thiong'o wrote the first East African drama, The Black Hermit, a cautionary tale that discusses, on top of racism, tribalism. This warned Africans about the white man's ploy to divide and conquer, therefore encouraging black solidarity to fight the colonizer. Some expressed the physical struggles of colonized black men both in poetry. A great example is that of Lusophone poetry of Antonio Jacinto in the classic poem Letter from a Contract Worker. Though written in Angola, it strangely pinpointed the experiences and feelings of alienation black South African miners faced. Or Charles Mungoshi's hugely metaphorical Waiting for the Rain that followed the suffering both mentally and physically of a native family that has been alienated from their ancestral land to a dry and barren one. Further works that were more direct in their messages, like Ngugi's The Trial of Dida and Kimati, Osmani Simbene's God's Beats of Wood, and Pepe Teller's Mayombe, were novels that had black heroes leading the struggle and directly fighting against colonization. As you can see, African literature in this age was very important. It helped open the door to early independence of states like Ghana, Benin, Mauritania, Rwanda, Burundi, Malawi, because it spread the message of solidarity. Collectively, all these literal themes and movements such as identity crisis, Western satire, racism, oppression, cultural clashes, unity, solidarity, the negritude, spiritualism, black pride, and freedom, as I discussed before, would fuse together to form a final push for nationalism and independence and welcome a new era to Africa, the era of Pan-Africanism. So thank you for watching our take on the history of post-colonial literature. Be sure to join us on our third and final installment, which will be the history of post-independence literature, where we will discuss the evolution and forms of literature that came when and after African nations eventually freed themselves from the bondage of colonization. See you there, and as always, thanks for watching. Mimsi Africa. For those who don't know Mimsi Africa is a new online brand that explores the deeper, more insightful side of African art, culture, and history in a very fun, modern, relevant, and social media kind of way. We're always producing fresh original videos and have so many ideas like this. So to keep updated on our awesome Afrocentric content like this, like and follow our accounts on these social media platforms. And if you have any ideas or suggestions, they are totally welcome. So don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching. Yeah.